We're now live, Lee. Thank you.
Great, many thanks. So, good morning, everybody, and welcome to all the councillors and members of the public. Thank you. So, under the red COVID-19 traffic light system, this meeting has been held via audiovisual conference only. All members participating via video conference will count for the purpose of the meeting quorum in accordance with Clause 25B of Schedule 7 to the Local Government Act 2002. The meeting has been live streamed to Council's YouTube channel. First of all, A1, apologies. So I've got an apology from Councillor Jepson. Thank you, Alex. Moving on to A2, do we have any conflicts of interest today?
Lee, could I just say something? We'll need to approve that apology.
Oh, sorry. Thank you, Pam. So all of those, can I have someone to accept the apologies? Thank you, Brenda, and seconded by Pam. All in favour, just raise your hand. Great. Thank you very much. So A2, any conflicts of interest today? So no, there's no conflicts of interest. And moving on to A3, public participation. So there's no public participation has been notified. And so moving on from that, A4, we have no actions from public participation. Right, so moving on to A5, we need to look at the minutes for confirmation. If you recall last meeting, we tied it over the 6th of October minutes for confirmation for today. So can I have a mover for the minutes of the Finance, Audit and Risk Committee meeting held on the 6th of October and the 1st of December as a true and correct record? Thank you, Alex. Seconded by Pam. All in favour? Raise your hand. Thank you very much. The motion is carried, and obviously there were no corrections. So going on to B1, Policy and Governance Report, we will now move on to this. Do I have a mover to receive the report? Thank you, Pam. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Brenda. All those in favour, please raise your hand. Excellent. The motion is carried. So, I think the best thing is, Amanda, do you want to talk to that report, please?
Yep, happy to talk to it. Apologies, it's just getting myself off mute.
That's okay.
So this is week 3 for me. So getting my head around all the work that I'm responsible for. So the Strategic Risk Register is a piece of work that we want to overhaul. And we've had a one session on looking at it and identified some of the things that need a little bit of tidy up, making sure that it's got really clear mitigations so that any risks have got clear mitigations, and the responsibility is assigned to someone so that we can monitor the mitigations. Is a really important aspect of the review of the Strategic Risk Register. Any questions on that?
Amanda, I have one through you, Lee. Overhaul the register in the coming months. Is there any chance of being any more specific than that? It seems to have been going on for a while. I know it's only week 3, Amanda.
It's a tough question. I can come back to the committee on that if you'd like a clear timeline with a deadline of when it will be completed by.
Or clearer.
Yep, I can work on that.
Thank you.
I think, Amanda, one of the areas of concern has been that there hasn't been dated bits in the strategic register where things move up and down from red to orange, etc. So I'd like to see that cleared up a bit as well. And let me just let me go on to it. So one other question I had, you had under governance failure, you had a workshop, and this, I appreciate this may be before your time, so it may be a question for Harry, but what were the results of the workshop you had with the community board members? Maybe Harry, are you able to answer that?
So can I just start before that, Lee? So one of the just your question about timing. So there's two parts to the review of the strategic risk register. One is the process itself. So what you have right now is just the risk that a particular issue presents. What you don't have is the ranking in terms of the mitigation and whether we think that actually offsets and is managing the risk. So the answer to your first question about moving up and down is actually because we don't have it. So what you should see, for instance, is something say that there's a high risk, and it may be red, but it may be green because the mitigation is all the practical things that we can do to actually offset that risk. So all you've got right now is the ranking of the risk, not the mitigation that we need to put in place. So that's a relatively simple thing to put in place, because that's a procedural assessment between the risk and the mitigation. Then the next level is to actually make sure we're actually capturing those things that are genuinely strategic risks versus those that are operational. And so when Amanda referred to, we actually had about 2 or 3 hour workshop going through our operating risk register and decided that there were a number on that were there that should be in the strategic risk and vice versa. So we're already on track to do that work. So it shouldn't be months before we bring this back. In fact, I'll have a chat with about getting it reshaped by the next FAR meeting. I don't see any reason why we can't do that, Amanda, do you? No, she's nodding her head.
Well, that if we could have that to the next FAR meeting, that would be excellent, because yes, it's been a work in progress. I appreciate that.
And sorry, your question about the governance workshop. So actually, it was a bit of a mix. We had the chairs and not many members turned up, actually. So, it went well, but I'm not sure the message filtered from the participants through to the members of the boards. So again, it's something I think we need to do again, but the key thing is we've got to get the board's members to actually attend as well. And so that was unfortunate. But the content and the feedback from those that did attend was good.
And did you have, how did you run the meeting? Who ran the meeting? Was
Karen walked. We had the basic information was just to remind people what good principles of good governance were, what the roles of community boards were versus council. We can send the overheads actually out just to councillors. It was very much a reminder of the stuff we did in the induction as well. So if we send that out to the councillors, and you get a good sense of what information was provided. Mm-hmm. Yep, would that help?
Yeah, that'd be good. Thank you.
Yep.
And presumably that was sent to all the community board members as well.
Yes. Yeah. Because the intention was to get as many people as they can. But as you know, it's difficult trying to find timing, particularly for community board members that actually works for the majority. But in fact, other than the chairs, I think there are only about 2 community board members in total, other than the chairs. So
is it worthwhile doing?
It's very low number. So we should run it again, I think.
Yeah. I think that probably would be useful. So just in terms of the strategic register, does anybody else have any questions they'd like to raise? Sorry, I didn't see Pam. If you'd like to pose your question.
It's Colin. Colin was before me.
Oh, I'm sorry. Colin, you go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Amanda, just a quick question. I'm sorry, I'm reading off a hard copy here because I can't get Stella and Zoom on the same thing. I haven't worked out that technology yet, but I'm working on it. So residents' perception survey, can you give us a bit of an update on where you're at with that? Because I just see a timeline here. Questions developed and approved by the 14th of February. Is that on track?
Yep. So Steph and my team is working with the company that have provided us that service last year. Off the top of my head, I can't remember their name. That's terrible. Apologies. Katrina might know.
Key Research.
Key Research, thank you.
Okay, yep.
And so we've just put a letter together to get approval for the pull from the electoral roll. And the questions are, we looked at last year's questions and some additions. I can't remember off the top of my head what the additions are, but I can find out what the additions are. But they were the recommendations from the last bit of kind of the unanswered pieces from the last round that we did. So it's all on track.
Okay.
Recollection, Katrina might be able to help, but I think one of the questions was, for instance, relates to something Pam raised around the use of wheelie bins. So is that right, Katrina? We were thinking about asking communities' views around some of the waste collection.
To be honest, I'm not sure, Harry. I think we'll have to go back and check that's included. If we want that included, I'm not sure whether that was a specific question or not.
Yeah.
So
I just recall Karen making a comment that there was
right.
things we might have been thinking about, but I just so they weren't necessarily what I'm saying is we were testing some community views about some specific things as opposed to just general satisfaction with services. So Amanda won't know that, so I have to dig into it and get back to you on that.
Okay, so how wide is that survey being imposed? Is that across the district?
No, it's based on a random sample, which is sorry, Amanda, I should hand over to you, but I'm happy to fill in any gaps.
I think it's 3,000. They select 3,000. So there's some science around, how many responses you need to get a correct or close to correct sample, and they'll give us plus or minus confidence levels.
Okay.
But yeah, 3,000 people are going to be surveyed. So I think we surveyed 3,000. I'm not sure the response rate last time was about 30.
The response rate was quite high last time.
Yeah.
It might be useful. Is this last survey on Stella for Colin to have a look at? Because I think it might be useful for you to catch up and see that.
I can make that available on Stella, Lee.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, that'd be quite useful because it'll give me a bit of a guide. And
yes.
So just on that, is there a reason that we only select a small percentage of our population, or is it is that assisted with the analysis, or is it something that we should be fielding right across the district?
Cost. I'd say that's a big element of the more people you survey, the greater the cost, obviously. And there's some good science around how many, what proportion of a population group you need to get a robust measure.
Okay.
And I think I believe Key Research have given us good advice on that. And
excellent. Thanks very much.
I think Colin, so it's spread evenly across the 3 towns and the rural districts. There's a good spread of male, female, and what we were concerned with the previous company, which is why we switched to Key Research, that it was very skewed towards the 65-plus-year-olds. And so this time, because they were the ones who had the time to answer the questions, but also the technology or the methodology that they used with the previous company was landline only, which simply just didn't get a good result. So the methodology is very sound, and it's quite a normal practice the way they've done this.
Excellent. Yeah.
I was very happy with the methodology.
Yeah. No, thank you. Appreciate that.
But have a look at it, because in the report it drills down to a lot of the methodology, and you can look at the demographics, etc. So it would be useful for you to see that.
Cool. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry, Pam. Thank you for being so patient.
No, that's fine, Lee. Thank you. One of the questions I have around, or one of the suggestions I have around the survey before it's undertaken, is that the all councillors and community board members and those that cannot answer the survey are deleted from the system before the numbers are finalised, because I feel that that is a wasted opportunity to talk to somebody else. Like we got the survey last time, or I had to contact them and say I can't answer those because I work for the council, I'm councillor, and I've just felt that that was an absolute waste of an opportunity to talk to somebody else. So that was just one suggestion I had. The second thing is a little bit further down in the report, Amanda, and it's part 12 under the beauty therapy and tattooing. So it's 3.3. And if you come to the last paragraph, we are currently in the scoping and research phase and have formed a project team with staff from Masterton and Carterton Wairarapa District Councils to progress. I think that should actually say Masterton, Carterton and South Wairarapa District Councils, doesn't it? Just doesn't make sense, those words along there.
That's correct, Pam. Yeah, that's a typo. Sorry about that, and well spotted.
Yeah. Sorry, you'll get used to me, Amanda. I'm one of those people. So thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Pam. Alex, did you have a question? Or your...
Oh, it was probably a comment, but Pam did raise a couple of good points. But just to reply to Colin, a 30% response rate is fantastic. And it's really, you can go online and see a confidence interval calculator to find out if you have a population of, say, 11,000, how many responses do you need to have a confidence of 2 to 3%. And certainly we're well above that statistically. But the crucial thing here is to do one survey and then replicate it so that we can trust the results and any changes from that. So going to a new methodology last year, it's crucial to continue that methodology to actually have information that is relevant.
Thanks, Alec. I've just got a question. To the best of my knowledge, the second survey wasn't budgeted for. And so it was about 25,000. I don't believe a second survey was budgeted, but can you confirm that, Katrina?
So when we did the LTP budgets, we estimated how much was required because we hadn't finalised the quotes. So we actually overestimated. So we do have enough budget this year to be able to do these surveys. Because the contract price came in quite a bit lower than we expected it to be. And one of the reasons for that was because we committed to using key research for the next sort of 3 years, I think it is.
Okay, so that we've budgeted what, for an annual or biannual survey?
So the one that my understanding is that the one that we are doing shortly in March, April is the annual survey, which will inform the annual report. So last year we did that quite late, so it wasn't done until July from memory. And so this is not the biannual one, this is now also the annual one. So the one that we're going to be doing is the annual one. And then we'll look at and Steph or Amanda have more details on this than me, but look at doing a biannual one later in the year, doing the second one.
Right, okay, so just as long as we're on track with budget. Was it 25,000?
Sorry, I don't have that figure on the top of my head. It was somewhere in that region of around 20,000, I think.
Okay, excellent. Thank you very much. Brenda.
And just to move through to 3.1 Wairarapa local alcohol policy, does this mean that there could be a possibility that we could combine the district licensing committees?
It might be a question for Steph, because she's involved in this project.
I would have to take that away, Brenda, as I'm not sure. I know we've already actually got a joint policy with the 3 district councils, so I'm not sure that would change, but it's something we could come back to you on once we look into that.
Yeah, I just think it'd be if we're all agreeing to the same alcohol policies, then why do our district licensing committees need to have their own separate entities is what I'm getting at. I just think it'd be prudent to align that as well if we're all doing the same thing. And the other one was 3.3 to do with the tattooing. So the way that I read it, when it comes to prohibited, whatever, the tattooing of the eye, the way that I read it, Masterton and Carterton say that it needs to be done by professional, but are we saying that the South Wairarapa say that we don't mind? We allow that? Because that'd be stupid, in my view.
I can probably speak to that if you would like.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that was just the exact resolution wording that came from that 2019 council meeting. I think at the time, officers here had the view that it wasn't necessary for us to take that extra step, but I've reviewed that with Rick and has also had a chat with Russell around that now, and I think that's something we would like to look at going on board with Masterton and Carterton. So we'll look at that in the research phase, and then councillors will be able to assess that again as well.
Cool. Excellent, thank you.
Thanks, Brenda. Does anybody else have any further questions for Amanda? Brenda, you might like to lower your hand. Okay. I've just got one further question. I'm sorry about the strategic register. Just in terms of comms, and we've had quite a lot of press attention. So is that, I see that's currently marked green. Is that not considered something that should be a move up the list of being somewhat critical, or what's your view on that, Harry?
So there's a difference between the action of communicating and how it's received. So in terms of, are we doing all we can to communicate with the resources that we have? We're certainly doing that. We can't, our risk is how, you get the classics in the South Wairarapa Times where the story is actually really good, but the headline is appalling, because it's attention seeking and those types of things. So certainly in terms of media inquiries, we're responding in a timely way. We're providing the responses. We're being proactive in the communication space. So it's a difference between the message and how it's received at the other end. So I'm confident we're doing all we can with the resourcing that we have, and I stress with the resourcing we have, because you can always do a whole lot more. You look at the example of this weekend. The actual amount of volume of communication in an emergency event, those types of things, I think is absolutely top class. And I take my hat off to Sheila and the team. And it's very difficult because the information is moving, it's shifting, it's when's this open, when's that, relying on other partners to provide us information like the bridge information around rumour hunger and so forth. So it's something we can always do better, but it's not for the actions that we're doing. It's there's part about how it's received. That'll be my comment, Lee. And bear in mind, I think but in fairness, the area, stress the resource in the area that we and we've discussed this with you, is social media, that we're not resourced to respond to that. And that's an area that is really important in the sense that a story gets taken up, fed out, spat out by very quickly in an uncontrolled way. Traditional media, at least you do have recourse through traditional media to the Media Council and so forth, which we have taken from time to time. But our ability to respond to social media is very limited.
Yes, I appreciate that. Great.
Can I add a little to that? Is it?
Yeah, no, Amanda, yeah.
I think the other thing that we're doing, and Sheila's not here to speak to this, is a stakeholder management approach, which kind of supports our comms. So the idea that you have key stakeholders in the community, you want to develop really good positive relationships with you, and those stakeholders then are the ones that speak up and add value to the story that you're telling about council and adds to the positive reputation in the community. So that's another piece of work that kind of straddles across Sheila and I as well.
Well, that's great to hear. That is fantastic.
Lee,
sorry, Colin.
Oh, sorry, Colin.
Colin?
Yeah, cheers. Thanks. I've got to take my hat off to Shell and the trying conditions that she was faced with communicating to our communities over the weekend and the events that occurred. But one of the things I'm really concerned about is that we seem to be getting a lot of media comms that are given via Wellington Water. Now, Wellington Water are our service providers, and where we might be shareholders, we, as an organisation, we are South Wairarapa District Council, and I still feel very strongly that the message at the end of the day should come via South Wairarapa District Council, not by Wellington Water. I mean, Harry may have a comment on that, but yeah, that's my view.
It's a mixture of both. So if there's anything of a strategic nature, or obviously they do come, so anything go in with that formally through our council committees or those types of things, they report in, that happens. And so but when we're in an operating environment where there's very quick updates on what's going on and operating, letting people know about the progress on like the boil water notices, those types of things, they're our best place to do it. We don't, they do not put out anything without us seeing it. We did had that in the past, and so nothing goes out from Wellington Water unless we have signed off on it internally, because it is a communication from council. They are us. They are it's like Rumahanger Roads. They are still council, which is a hard thing for the community to understand. They people view them as an internal contract. It's the same thing with Rumahanger Roads. That all the communication is effectively councils. So that's the comment. So is it horses for courses, Colin?
Okay, you happy with that, Colin?
Yep. Yeah, as I say, we need to front foot a lot of stuff, and I feel we are the consent holders for the services that are being provided to our communities. Therefore, we carry a degree of responsibility, and that includes communicating with our communities. So yeah, point taken. Thanks, Harry.
Okay, Kit.
With your comment before, Lee, was that to do with reputational risk? Was that sort of the topic you were talking about?
Well, comms in general, but obviously when we get these negative press reports, obviously it does have some impact on reputational risk. I think it's a shame that with the new reporters with the Times Age, that they tend not to attend meetings now, and they'll report based on the information that's put online rather than attending and hearing the discussions, which is a shame. And anything we could do to change that would be a good step forward.
Yeah, I think it deserves a bit of time. And in the October minutes, there was consideration to be given to adding reputational risk to the strategic register under comms. So it will, as a matter of course, now be given some time.
Thanks, Kit. So would you see that, Amanda, as a separate line item? Reputational risk.
That when we had that meeting that Harry talked about, when we were looking at operational risk versus strategical risk, that was exactly the conversation that we had, Kit. So, how do we untangle comms from reputational risk? And then we had the conversation about stakeholder engagement.
Lovely, thanks.
Okay.
So, I mean, the key thing about comms, it's a mitigation. It's not. It's a mitigation to something. So it's either, and the purpose of comms is to inform, or to or basically inform, or it could be to shift, educate, shift people's opinion. There's a number of ways. So, but it's a mitigation. So you'd normally see the action of communicating on the, if you like, the right-hand side of the page as a mitigation to a particular strategic risk, and that's the thing to communicate. The way it's sit down here, it's just simply written as a strategic risk as a communication failure, which is, in other words, it's the mitigation that's failing. It's not necessarily the strategic risk, which is the reputational risk. It's a social license, really, is essentially the guts of it, and trust. Yeah.
Yeah. Brenda, thank you for being so patient.
That's all right. Just with regards to resource to respond and thinking about the boiled water notification, one thing that I did actually put out there is that you have a whole bunch of councillors within the communities, and would we be considered as one of the stakeholders to be able to communicate that information out there? So to that end, I'd say, yeah, well, go for it, use and abuse us. We're here, we're actually in the towns or in the areas, and that'd be an absolutely great way. And communicating to our community, I mean, doing it through comms, through the online, through the website, that's great. But there are, again, still, there are a number of people that don't get the paper, they don't get internet, they don't have internet. So that would be a really good conduit in order to kind of use us in order to get that message out there, because I do believe that that's a kind of like a missing element.
Thanks, Brenda. In fact, Shield's looking for some volunteers as we speak to put up boil water notices in Featherston right now. So someone please could text Shield and say Brenda's just put her hand up. I'm not sure. Your point is right. And look, we have done it, and you guys have done a fantastic job. Remember the first COVID and all those types of things. You guys have been out and talking and helping us. It is a team effort. It always should be. We should always be working together on this. You're not a stakeholder. You are. We are us.
Yeah. So I remember a time when Martinborough actually had a boil water notice, and I distinctly remember Colin helping out, and I actually helped out as well by delivering the notices to the town. So I'd like to see that continue. It'd be great. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, and it's a good reminder. It's great. We appreciate the offer.
Thanks, Brenda. And I think I speak for all of the councillors that we're all happy to put our hands up if you need help. I think all of us would agree to that. So at any time. Colin, thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Lee. And I'm sorry to drag on the issue about public perception. And when Brenda raised the issue of Boar Bush, I triggered a little thing in my memory. So Harry, and you might take this on board too, is that when we communicated about the boil water notice for Featherston because of some intrusion in the Boar Bush Gully reservoir, our community see that reservoir as actually being the lake at the top that used to supply the water. And I must admit, I got hammered from people saying, but we don't use Boar Bush any longer. It's no longer a source of water or emergency. That's what you've been telling us, because we're getting frogs coming out of the tap. So the important thing is to, I now understand that we actually have some holding tanks up there with about 400 cubes of water that is fed from our Woodside treatment unit, and it's gravity fed into Featherston. So I have an understanding of it now more so than I did before. But when we use the word reservoir, that's the sort of thing our community sees, and they think it's the mud dam. So I think some clarity around those things are quite important.
Yeah, look, I'd actually take that on board. It's one of those things where over time, Shield, Stefan, they'll understand how the system works. So even myself, but the word reservoir, you're absolutely right. Yeah. It can mean, people can apply a lake or a tank, so the clarity of saying storage tank might have been a better wording to use rather than reservoir, because people just, as you say, it's a decommissioned emergency supply.
Thanks.
But I think, so long story short, I think, take that on board, but it's also just a simpler factor of also, we're learning where all the pipes go and all that kind of stuff. I mean, our experts know, but our new staff are still trying to pick, we're just working that out. Yeah.
Right. Thanks,
so
Harry.
Your experience,
Thanks, Harry. Thanks, Colin. Okay, if we haven't got any further questions, I suggest we move on to B2, which is the finance report. So Can I have someone to nominate that we receive the report? Thank you, Colin. And can I have a seconder for that? Oh, thank you, Pam. All in favour to receive the report, raise your hand. Thank you. The motion's carried. So, Katrina, can you talk us through the highlights here, and then we can go from there with questions?
Great. Thank you, Councillor Hay. Okay, so in this finance report, I'm presenting the 6-month results, so the half-yearly results to you all. That includes the financials and also the rates, arrears, and where that is sitting. So overall performance, we are in a strong position at the half-year, at the 6-month mark. 504,000 is our operating surplus against a budget of 265. That is mainly due to an uplift in the building consenting fee income and also interest income. We didn't anticipate that interest rates would bounce back quite as fast as they had in terms of interest rates. So we are getting a little bit more on our term deposits than we expected. And we've also got a little bit more in term deposits than what we expected to have. So that is what is making up that, that surplus in operating income. Under operating income, we also have about 1.3 million that is made up of extraordinary income items. So that is for the Provincial Growth Fund, the Mayoral Task Force, and the stimulus funding, which is the Provincial Growth Fund, sorry. So there's about 1.3 million in additional income sitting in the operating income. So once that's taken out, we're about 300K above where we thought we were going to be. Subsidies, NZTA subsidies are down in the operating income space, and this is just to do with the timing of the work program. So we base the phasing of our budget on generally speaking on last year's budget and how that was phased or what the actuals were last year, but it's not necessarily always the case because work gets delayed for various reasons, most notably generally weather. So that is expected to be on budget by the end of the year. Yeah. So operating expenditure, moving on to that. We're showing that operating expenditure is unfavourable by 3.8 million, sorry, 1.38 million. However, the majority of that, once again, is the those extraordinary income items, because the expenditure also offsets those. So the operating result of 500,000 operating surplus is effectively removed those items. So in terms of operating expenditure, corporate services, we're seeing a real an uplift in the IT space. That's around, we've had a program of work where we've needed to actually invest a little bit more money in getting our business continuity working. So that is costing more than we had anticipated for that work to happen. That is expected to continue to the end of the year, and the new budgets for next year will take into account any uplifts in that area. What else can I highlight to you? Governance is favourable, mainly due to the iwi liaison pool of money that we are not spending a lot of this year. We will be spending a little bit of it, but we're not expecting to spend all of that by any means, and the balance will be carried over to next year. Resource management, that's a little bit favourable to budget in terms of expenditure. We're seeing a reduced use of consultants at the 6-month mark. It's difficult to predict whether this will continue to the end of year. because it's very difficult to predict when the team will need to use consultants, but at the moment we are looking favourable there. Amenities, overall amenities are unfavourable by about 100k or 95k, mainly due to the libraries at 129k, and this is because of the NZLPP grant income. So that's offset in the income space as well. Land transport, under budget, and the income is reflected here in the expenditure, as you would expect. The waters, now they are unfavourable by quite a lot. If we take out sorry, I've lost track of what I was going to say. So we have added additional stimulus funding under the waters to offset some of the, sorry, I'll go back again. That was actually as part of this year's budget for Wellington Water and the stimulus funding. There was a portion that was OPEX in the stimulus funding because Wellington Water did want to put some more into that space. However, they are still unfavourable to budget. We are working with Wellington Water to fully understand that, and we will be giving more information about that shortly. The main issue seems to be in the reactive space, so the reactive maintenance space. So that is unforeseen, unplanned failures in the network. There was an incident in Featherston in the wastewater space where they had a sewage overflow not long ago. This flooding event that we've just had will also impact on these, because we will need to obviously spend money to fix the issues that we've got as a result of all the flooding over the weekend. There was very limited amount of that built into the budget. So that is what is, I guess, causing the majority of this unfavourable result in the water space. Depreciation is also a little higher than we expected. However, it's not, so that is making up a portion of this unfavourable result as well. Non-operating income, as expected, Waka Kotahi, once again, it filters through from the operating income to operating expenditure, and the capital subsidies are also down because of the delay in the work program there. Other income is higher than expected to be, and the majority of the reason for that is the grants expenditure. Once again, that's the capex portion, 920,000, the capex portion of the provincial growth fund that we've got there. Contributions income, so that's your financial contributions from your developers, is also a lot higher than we had anticipated. Very difficult to understand what the end of year result there is going to be as well, but at the moment we are over on that. The other income items, non-operating income items, are all items that are related to capital works, so they need to sit on this statement. However, they are all transferred to reserves at the end of the year, so that forms our income that we get in our reserves. So if I just pause there, actually, and I will just open up for questions on the financial statement.
Okay. I'm not sure. I think Alex was first, and then
I think Colin was, but I'll jump ahead.
Sorry, Colin.
Just a quick one. Do we have? Can you identify when the FAR rate will be changing from our roading? And what impact that will have? I assume it's been accounted for, but sort of the dollar value impact that's going to have on us.
Charlie might be able to comment on the dollar value impact, but it does change from the 1st of July 2023. So okay. it reduces down to 52%, and then the following year it reduces down to 51%.
Cool. And I'm also, and this may be too much work, but it is an idea that from another council, we do have these lumps of money that confuse things like Meritassos jobs, PGF funding, libraries funding, whether we could actually have those stripped out. But I know it's an accounting process that we can't, but it does tend to change the view of business as usual.
Sure. So I can work with Charlie on that. We could look at including in the report going forward a statement down to the operating surplus level that has those items taken out.
Yeah, I just think, I don't know whether other councillors might find it useful, but it is a bit of a distraction. Yeah.
Well, I appreciate that. It is the operating surplus result, though, has reflected those items being taken out effectively. But yeah, we can look at that. Yep.
Yep. Just to let you know that in the LTP process, the reduction in the NZTA percentage was taken into account. So the budgeted income is taking that drop into account.
Thanks, Charlie. Can you just remind me of the level of funding for the libraries? I've just forgotten the exact amount that is. Is that about 150?
The income that we've had so far this year is 154, I think it was. Yep, and against expenses of 129. Now there is some timing difference because we get to the end of each month and send off an invoice to the library partnership program. So there's usually a little bit of a lag on those, but the effect is it's a net zero cost to the council.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Charlie, for that. So now we've got Colin. Would you like to jump in? And Alex, do you want to lower your hand?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Katrina, just a couple of questions on the Three Waters, which is unfavourable to the tune of $1.087 million. You know, that's a significant amount of money that's working in an unfavourable state towards our books. I'm just wondering about a high level risk analysis that has any high level risk analysis been done, and obviously, these unfavourable things crop up from time to time for unseen events, but you know that's an awful lot of money. It's money, obviously, that we have to find, we have to pay, and I guess that I'm concerned about this is an ongoing matter between us and Wellington Water. So perhaps an answer from Harry, perhaps. Yeah.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Colin. I know this is a tricky one because these aren't necessarily things we can turn off. You know, so if we have you know, the kind level of you know, it's old infrastructure and rain, all those types of things are going on. Our responses to water leaks. So what we're going to try and do is get the understanding of what business as usual in terms of, you know, low level priority 2 and 3 work actually is. And so we've never had a baseline to compare this against in the time. Versus the, you know, those genuine big things like the waste spill in Featherston and those types of things. So, you know, in part it's trying to get the baseline right. What is what we'd expect as normal activity versus those just horrible things that happen. But the other thing is, you know, that those horrible things seem to be happening with enormous rapidity. In the last wastewater spill in Featherston, that cost about 150K alone. You know, so I'm expecting that we'll be reporting that to you once we've finalised all that. But that's going to happen again with this one, I imagine, and more. So yeah, it's a very tricky one, and we've been in endless discussions with Wellington Water trying to find our way through that. And part of this will be a discussion we're having tomorrow as part of our annual plan workshops as well.
And if I can just add to that, Lee. So part of this $1 million, I appreciate it is a lot, is offset by the stimulus funding. So in terms of where Wellington Water's budgets are tracking, they are sitting at about, and Charlie, you can probably confirm this, but I think it's about 230,000 over at the 6-month mark. So it's not, so the majority of that million is actually stimulus funding and a little bit over on the depreciation. So it's not.
Just to interrupt with a very quick breakdown of that amount. 244 is overspend in Wellington Water's OPEX budget. 507 is stimulus funding, so it's matched by income. And I'm just getting the depreciation. If you remember, we had a revaluation of our assets at the end of last year. And of course, if your asset values increase, your depreciation naturally increases as well. And that was too late in the process to hit the LTP budgets. Although we had forecasted some increase in there, it was more than we were expecting. Thanks.
Thanks, Charlie, for that. Gareth, you've been waiting very patiently.
Thank you, Lee. Yes, look, I don't want to go through line by line. What concerns me is, and obviously supporting what Colin's saying about Wellington Water, but when I look at the expenses, the forecasts going ahead are pretty scary. And if you look at that, particularly once again with the Wellington thing, the overspends are looking to be, 800, 900,000 over. How accurate can we feel as a FAR committee to support those forecasts? I mean, or is it just really just finger in the air? That's one question. The other one that really worries me is the professional services, which are, say at the moment we're 80% over, could be another 30% over. Are we actually still short of expertise in house? Is that part of the problem there, Harry, or is it are we being challenged with new requirements that we didn't have to fulfill before? If that's the case, can we not go back to either our water people or our resource management people or DIA and say, come on, we're doing more work, let's fund it?
I think that's true. I mean, there's definitely things like stormwater, comprehensive consents for those. That's all new work. We've got and we had budgeted on the water rates stuff, but that comes out, the professional services side of that for the for consents. So a lot of that work is coming through. So you're absolutely right on that. Sorry, Garrett, your first part of the question.
Oh, I'm a bit concerned about some of the forecasts.
I
know it's just. I mean, it is a certain amount of stargazing, but some of it's quite scary.
Well, and just to reflect, so part of that is getting ahead of the renewal curve. So if we're constantly spending money on fixing the leaks and not getting ahead of actually renewing the pipes, it's that's the $1 million question: is how do we get to the state that we're actually renewing our pipe work over the 10, which is this infrastructure plan that we've put. That's why the numbers are going up, is because you're trying to fix the pipes at a steady rate, but at the same time you're fixing all the leaks and everything else. So yeah, and then that's the equation, that relies on really, really good asset management planning. And you remember one of the things we're having a lot of work with Wellington Water was the condition assessment to inform our asset management plans, and that's exactly at the cusp of that, because a lot of it's modelled. And what Wellington Water are trying to do, and even things like the smart water meter tests inform that, is trying to get a sense of what our real asset condition is, because that's a granularity to give us the information to make that kind of decision. So that's the hard bit of the equation.
The specific I wanted, I'd actually cite that last night at Mary Standing we were talking about stormwater, and that's, to my mind, is a regional council concern. And it's going to include water races as well, but the enforcement is through regional council. So we sit back and say, well, hang on, we're going to have to front this.
We do, because we're the applicant. We're not the role of the the council, the regional council, is to consider the consents, and decide whether to grant and what conditions and those types of things. Our role, and then the enforcement that follows, is to apply for the consents. And which is why we need the professional services to actually answer that. Because what we're trying
makes a huge difference to a council our size as opposed to a council. I mean, if they're going to start analysing all the stormwater for clarity and whether it's
huge, absolutely huge. Yeah.
It's huge. Yeah. And are we going to be funded for that?
Well, no. I mean, unless the government passed by law the water entities, then they will pick up the check for the stormwater. But look, there's no, it still falls back on water users. They will still be funding that systems one way or another, whether it's through council if the free waters don't go ahead, but if they do, it'll be through their entities. But you're right.
That's why I'm just saying the forecasts are scary, particularly with stuff like that coming down the line. That's all.
Yeah, and look, and that's it, because this is a very good example where the standards are getting higher and higher and higher. Stormwater, traditionally, the only parameters that were part of the consents were hydraulic, the force of water and its sediment. So it was sediment flows and that's effect on waterways. That was about the only thing that was in the consent for stormwater, whereas now it's actually the contaminants and streams inside as well. Yeah, and so this is a good example where, and that's not just the regional council, that's nationally, right across New Zealand, stormwater has been literally just the last cab to be concerned with, and now the standards are raising and raising and raising.
But that has to be, it's going through, I'm just nervous, it's going to go through this year. We've already had the first slice of it and I can't see any funding for it. And that's why I'm sort of nervous about some of this forecasting. I mean, yes, I agree with what you're saying, Harry, but I'm just going forward, surely they should be putting some more money in the kitty for that. If our area is so vast, and when you start talking about monitoring stormwater in the South Wairarapa, you are biting off a huge chunk.
Yeah, no, you're right. Tamati ROI, the regulator, is saying that they're not going to start regulating stormwater per se for about another 5 years. So they put it down the list for this very reason. It's the practicability of it. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Alex, thank you.
I'm going to follow on from Garrick and Colin that I'm very concerned about this. I remember that we sat in front of Wellington Water and said, what do you need? And we also, can you deliver? And they gave us what they needed, and we gave them that money. And they said, what are your response times? And they gave us it, and neither of them are being met. I understand the issue with regards to unforeseen events. So if we strip those out, I'll be very interested to find out why a company that should be predicting price rises, staffing changes, is not putting a budget through that's achievable. But secondly, and this is probably a bit more of an interesting one for Katrina, that if unforeseen events are constantly occurring, are we able to rate for them knowing that we're going to have some unforeseen events but not knowing where they might fall? On both those would be great.
I mean, the answer, not respect for Katrina, the answer is yes. I mean, look, for instance, we do that in the roading area. We set we have a roading reserve where, as an example, where we explicitly budget for emergency events that affect our roading network. We haven't got a replicable method for that in water. So the answer, Alex, yes, we can do exactly that. And Katrina, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, no, I was literally going to say very similar. There is a balance between rating. We don't want to rate too much, and then not have as many events as we anticipated. Historically, we have I guess, funded these one-off events out of unders and overs, so out of the overall year-end operating surplus that's generally sits above budget. To be fair, these events are getting more regular and are costing more. So I think it's fair to say that we need to look at other avenues and mechanisms we can put in place to help mitigate this. Yeah. And a reserve, as Harry mentioned, is a very good mechanism to do that.
I'd just like to add a few comments on this Wellington Water. So the results that we're seeing here are not new. There's been continual overspends going back. And one of the concerns that I've had, and I'm not quite sure how to untangle this, but as a shareholder, surely we would also be looking at their costs that they have. And it seems every time there's a meeting, we have 4 or 5 of them coming over the hill. We inspect the pipe the other day at Taranika. We have 4 or 5 of them, 3 cars. All of that surely has a cost, and it will be attributed to us in some way, shape or form. And then if you look at the salaries that they have at Wellington Water, I mean, as shareholders, can we have any impact on their costs, which inevitably will flow onto us? Yep. Alex, go for it.
Yeah, certainly we have an influence at the committee level to the board, but as an operational level, that is very much, we have to raise it to the board, who then will raise it with the CEO and then drill down on that. Now I will, Garrick and I will raise that and look at a cost efficiency and whether or not the last time they had an efficiency review of the company, and as shareholders we can certainly ask for that. But it is very much, we are governance, not operations, and we have to tiptoe down a line on that one.
Thanks, Ella. I mean, I appreciate that, but just, you know, I just see dollar signs every time Wellington Water trot over the hill.
Yeah, I was disappointed to see 4 or 5 staff when one would have done for that pipe visit. It was very odd. Yeah,
and I mean, to be frank, we could have all marched down there ourselves and done the same job. But anyway, also, I've just got a couple of other questions for Katrina. So, just regarding reviewing developer contributions, would that be at all likely to take effect in this financial year, or is that something for next financial year?
The review of the financial contributions in terms of how much we are charging developers. So there's 2 elements there, and I've got Russell on the line, so he can probably correct me if I'm wrong. But the district plan actually sets the financial contributions that we can charge developers, and that is under review at the moment. We do also have fees and charges that we charge that sit outside those development contributions, those financial contributions, and that comes under the fees and charges income. So that is for resource consenting fees, for getting resource consents through, that we can affect. And the team, the planning team, has reviewed those, and we will be presenting the amendment or their recommendations as part of the annual plan workshops.
And so that wouldn't take place until 2022.
1st of July for any fees and charges that we decide to alter. The district plan, Russell might be able to give you an update on when that may take effect. Russell?
Actually, I understood that there was a possible way that we, South Wairarapa, could change the developer contributions.
Yeah, actually you're right, they are doing a review at the moment, and that's going, they're looking at doing a plan change to the current combined district plan. But in terms of when it's going to take effect, Russell, are you able to?
Yeah, sure. Good morning, councillors. So you've raised the topic of financial contributions. And when that topic comes up, it also raises the topic of the merit of development contributions. So those considerations have been raised within the district plan review committee, combined district plan review committee. The prospect of Councillor Hay has raised it also in the, I think it was Planning and Reg committee, in terms of the merit for taking a topic where there's merit of priority or urgency and raising it forward. So that's to be signalled back within the district plan review topic. So that thinking is already there, but I have to reactivate that and check further on that in terms of the possibility of bringing forth a plan change in advance of the district plan review work itself. So that is something that will be followed up on. when you get into the topic of financial contributions approach, raising the figures versus compiling and putting in development contributions under the district plan, the onus there is to make very sure that you've done all the required and robust calculative work to bring in a development contributions policy, and that applies for any council when it wants to bring forth a robust development contribution. So it's that thinking that needs to be done, and decision making that also has to happen within the district plan review topics.
Great, thank you, Russell. I guess where I'm coming from, and I know the work you're doing on the district plan review, but let's say, for South Wairarapa to do a district plan change, let's say that might cost 50,000, but on the flip side of that, the income that we might be getting from developers would far outweigh that cost. So is there any merit, or are we able to do a plan change for South Wairarapa and look at the cost? Because with the growth in South Wairarapa, the potential for huge income returns from developers is quite great, I imagine.
I can answer part of that. Our current financial contributions are actually on a percentage, so a percentage of the land value. So naturally, as land prices increase, and the financial contributions, I believe, are paid at the market value when the final consent is ready to be issued. So as land values are going up, then the contributions income also increases at the same rate as the land value increases. So to some degree, we are collecting a lot more income just through the value of land going up, and that is what is reflected in the statements. But Russell may have some further comment on that.
I guess I was looking at the potential for even more income from that area.
No, Katrina summed it up, and but Councillor Hay, you raise a very valid point, and it's there's some request or concern element from the other councils of also seeing the likely merit of advancing a plan change to increase financial contributions to a needed level for financial management purposes, and to reflect the onus that increasing development puts on infrastructure provisioning, etc.
Yeah, great. Thank you for that, Russell. Now, Pam, I see. Sorry, I'm not sure. Brendan, did you raise your hand first, or was that Pam? Pam?
You go, Pam.
Brenda was first.
Oh, you've got. Oh, okay. Off you go, Brenda.
I get the potential to raise the financial increases for development of land. I would hate to see us be put into a position where it's so expensive that it becomes no longer viable to develop. So if that could be done with prudence, I suppose, is what I want to say.
Yeah, it's only a balancing act, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a fine balancing act.
It is, and certainly as part of the discussions that we'll be having around fees and charges, that's something that the planning team will be able to fill you all in on and put their views around all of that to you all. Yeah. But it is definitely a balancing act, because we don't want to inhibit growth.
Yes, and that's what I'm getting at, is that we have to tread very, very carefully, because at the end of the day, it'll be us councillors that make that decision. So just, thank you.
I just also want to add the same point, that if something was proposed and the development community thought was totally unreasonable, they would appeal it. So you'll end up in Environment Court, and so what may look like a $50,000 administration cost to do it can quickly blow out to hundreds and hundreds of thousands. So it's something you go into very carefully. Because again, the cost, you can't just say we just want more revenue. You've got to have an explanation of what the impact on infrastructure from that growth actually is. It's got to have an argument.
Yeah,
the driving of the cost.
Right. Thanks,
that's
Harry.
correct. Councillor West raises the topic of costs and charges being fair and reasonable to those incurring the cost. So we've got to be mindful of that, because at the end of the day, as Harry mentions, they've got to be defendable, and we don't want to buy ourselves an unnecessary fight or being seen as a council that's applying non-robust or irrelevant charges.
Thank you, Russell. Pam, thank you. Your turn.
I think that's a very fine line to tread. We're getting the balance right. My question is slightly different. It's on 2.1.4, which is the operating expenditure. And you've got in there, Katrina, that the increased cost to upgrade the IT system is going to be higher than budgeted. Can I ask what the total budget for that is, please?
In terms of what we're expecting to spend?
Yeah. So you've it's
so
going to be 200 over. What's the total?
That's 200 over in total for. So what's the total budget? So it's actually increased monthly charges. Because we've had to put new files in place and new connectivity between Greytown and us and the libraries, and also enabling for business continuity purposes, enabling staff to be able to work remotely and have a good user experience. So being able to get into the servers and find their files quickly and in a timely way. So that's what it covers. I believe that Charlie may actually have some figures, but in terms of the total cost to that, I am thinking that it's around the 60K for the year for that component.
So if it's 60K for the year, how come it's 200?
Oh, that's on
a budget.
So that's an additional. Sorry, I'm just kind of looking at my results. So I think what I'm indicating in there is that we're expecting for overall corporate services to be above budget by 200,000. Sorry, that might be quite badly worded. It's not just the IT costs that will. $200,000 is the whole of corporate services.
Okay, all right. So my next question
makes more sense.
If something is 200K over budget, should that be coming to council for approval? Is that outside the sign-off things, or is it because we're breaking that down within corporate services to individual things? Are we then letting that 200,000 slide under the radar?
So it is made up of several different things. It's certainly not just one thing. The main thing is the IT. However, that does leave, of course, other costs that are going over budget as well. They are generally smaller in nature in terms of their individual costs, and it's some of it is it's across the HR space, across the comm space. It's an uplift in consultants' costs in getting the rest of the additional work that we did around the rates issue that we had this year or last year, and the additional comms for that. So there's a lot of little things that it's adding up to. There's no but the IT thing is one specific thing that we can identify. Are you wanting more surety around what makes up that 200,000?
No, I think I'll leave that at this stage because you've given me an idea of where that's going to come across. My next question is, where is that 200,000 coming from? Which pool of reserves or pool of money is that over spend going to come out of, please?
So overspends that we have operationally generally come out of equity.
Yeah.
So we can't rate the ratepayer, excuse me, for, well, generally speaking, you don't rate the ratepayer for an overspend in your current year's budgets. You don't go back to the following year and catch that up. No. So it will generally come out of the operating surplus at the end of the year, and it relies on that being over budget. Generally, councils take an approach of over sort of a period of time in terms of different financial years. You can see where you've got surpluses, where you've got operating surpluses above what was budgeted. So that's where the unders and overs thing sort of comes in. So the financial statement is at the moment forecasting that the operating surplus is going to be about $300,000 above where we budgeted it for. So that overspend would come out of that effectively.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Pam. Have you got any, you happy with those answers?
Yep, thanks. I'll just give it a bit more thought about that. So, yep, that's great.
Okay. So just thinking, moving on to 2.3 here, the reserves.
Yep.
Has anybody got any specific questions they want to raise regarding the reserves?
This is something new that we've put in. It's based on the reserves table that is in the long-term plan. So if you looked at your long-term plan, it's just taken out of that, and then I've added a few more columns in there to reflect the main reserves that I think that the councillors are interested in, being the restricted reserve and the infrastructure reserve. As a general rule, we only update these reserves at the end of the year, but I appreciate that councillors want to understand and be aware of any unforeseen expenditure that we are looking at coming out of this reserve. So that's what I've reflected here for you. The only spend in the unbudgeted spend in the infrastructure reserve is the additional for those footpaths at the stage of Five Rivers Medical Centre that we're aware of.
Thanks. I think that's very useful. I'd like to see that continue to have those reserve funds.
Yeah, so I think it's important when we do discuss reserves that we look out to the future. So that's why I've put the 10-year forecast in there, because there's no point in looking at it what we're expecting at the end of this year and saying, oh, okay, well, we've got $3 million or something, we can approve this expenditure out of this reserve without having the full picture of the 10 years and what we have forecast to use that reserve for.
Yeah, I think it's very, very helpful to have that. Colin, you've got a question.
Yeah, thanks. Katrina, just in terms of depreciation reserves, that can be used for the likes of Featherston Pipe, for instance, across the Taraniki. Could we use funding from that to assist us in that once a decision's made?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, that's all I want to know.
Yes, we would need to have a look at that reserve and see what's there, what's available that relates to water. But yes, absolutely, because it's an upgrade, that would be the first place that we would look to fund it from. Perfect,
thank you.
Thanks, Colin. I've got a quick question. I'm not sure if it's a Harry question, but I see we've got a budget of 20,000 for the rebrand rollout.
Oh, is this under CapEx?
Under CapEx.
Okay.
Look, it's now 3 years since we've had the new branding, and I find it very disappointing this hasn't happened. So can you maybe give some assurances that this will happen in this financial year? Harry?
Sorry, what was the action?
20,000 is budgeted to complete the rebrand rollout, and given it's now 3 years since it was signed off, I'd like to see that work completed. So do you have can you give us some security that will happen?
Look, I'll have a chat. I'll have a chat with Sheil, so we can get on with it. Yep, we'll do.
Yeah, and look, on a personal note, if you need any assistance with that, I'd be happy to help in any way.
Yeah,
Run
no,
round,
thanks,
run
Lee.
round
Appreciate that.
council
Yeah.
and block new logo stickers on things.
Yeah.
But
Lee, could I just jump in there and ask a question? Is that just for the sign, that 20,000, is that left for doing the signage, completing the signage around town so that we're all on a more modern signage right around town, or is there something else in that rebranding money that has to still be done apart from that? Thanks.
Yes, that's exactly what most of it's for. And I know that anecdotally, both Bryce and Rick have been ordering signs recently. So possibly the COVID may have had a delay in them actually going up, but I've definitely seen them come into the office.
Oh, lovely, Charlie. Thanks.
Thanks, Charlie. Colin, did you have your hand up or have you popped it down again?
No, I had my question answered by others. Thank you.
Great. Okay, Ben.
So in terms of CapEx, Councillor Hay, if I can just say, we are seeing a delay in delivery of projects, especially in the amenities space, where it's just a lack of getting contractors and contractors being able to start and what they sort of promise their start date is, and when their actual start date is somewhat different at times. So we are not expecting to deliver the whole capital project or program of works this year. There is a risk in that, because of course the more you delay something, the more expensive it is. And inflation, as we know, has a lot of pressure in that area, and it's going up quite significantly. So that's just flagging that there is a risk that those projects potentially may end up costing more than what is budgeted. However, having said that, the two main projects in amenities are fixed amounts of money. They're not at this stage. So the play space in Greytown is a fixed amount of money that the councillors have agreed to pay towards that. So it may be that the project needs to be scaled back somewhat to meet the budget.
Colin.
Yeah, sorry, I just had an alarm go off at the house and I've forgotten my question. So can I come back to it? Sorry.
Sure. Okay, just moving on to 2.5. Everybody, whose dog is that?
Sorry.
Lee, you're on mute.
Gosh, it automatically muted me. So just thinking about the rates arrears, and obviously we've all read your commentary, but are there any specific issues you want to raise there, or how are you tracking in terms of getting direct debits? Is that
so in terms of rates arrears, obviously, as you all know, are the rates still outstanding from the previous year's rates. So we're really happy with where we are with that. You can see from the tables that we're not talking about a lot of properties, and a lot of that money is actually tied up in things that are, in terms of settlement, are out of our control. So there's really only very few, 7 people on repayment plans for their arrears. So yeah, in terms of that, we're in a really good space. In terms of outstanding rates, so that is the current year's overdue rates. We are seeing that they are higher in terms of dollar value, but also in number of properties with outstanding rates this year. That has increased from sort of the beginning of the late last year, when we were seeing actually the numbers in terms of the numbers of properties with outstanding rates was lower than the previous year. So that has increased. It's still tracking, I think, in terms of number of properties, lower than it was last year. But we are, part of it is timing of instalments and when the instalments are due, because a lot of people, well, not a lot of people, some people do take longer to pay their instalment. So there is a little bit of a timing issue. We'd love to see more people on direct debits. We actively try and get people on direct debits when they, whenever they contact the rates team. So overall, yes, I think we are comfortable with where it is. We would like to see it lower, but we are working with our ratepayers as much as we can on that.
And Kirsty, I'd just like you to pass my congratulations on to Kirsty. She does a great job in that.
She does. She does.
She's
yes.
fantastic. Look, it's 11:30. I'm happy to keep going, but if people want a 5-minute break, yep. So does everybody want a 5-minute break, or do you want a 10-minute break, or what do you want?
Your 5 minutes.
I'm happy to keep going.
Right,
Yeah.
let's have a 5 minutes now, 11:30. So let's get back at 11:35. How's that?
So have we finished with the financial report then, Lee? Have we finished that?
Has anybody got any outstanding further questions? Brenda, did you had sent me an email regarding overspends in terms of delegations? Is this a moment to talk about that, or are you comfortable with all of the answers we've received so far?
I'll have a look at it over my break just to see where we're at with that.
Okay,
Cool.
great. Okay, then thanks everybody. We'll see you back at 11:35. Right. One more minute. Steph, are you still there?
Yes, I am, Lee.
So did you turn that off while we had the break?
No, sorry, I didn't.
Okay, well, that's fine. We're still, so just for everybody's information, we're still live and recording. Okay, it's 11:35. So we'll resume. Pam and Alex. So we'll just wait a second for Pam and Alex, and who else is missing? Right. Great. Thank you, Alex. So I think we'll resume now. It's 11:36. So did anybody have any final questions for Katrina regarding the financial report? Brenda.
Great. Thank you, Lee, for reminding me about the financial report. And I just want to touch on the whole delegations. Can we have assurance from finance that when unbudgeted work exceeds the delegation that we are kept informed? And that goes back, I think, also leads into what Garrick was asking, is going to ask later on. But it's just that financial delegations are there for a purpose. And we've got as part of our policy that we are to be kept informed. And I understand that we weren't at one stage. So just if we can kind of keep an eye on that.
Yeah. Look, in fact, I've just sent a note round. Jill might have seen it, Brenda, just that I think, we do need to make sure we get those right. The lineup of operating, decision making, those things, and decisions and delegations. But it's also one of the key ones we also need to actually have a discussion about is where emergency works sit, and what the level of delegation is there. Because we had that classic example with the Turaniko pipe. The desire was to get on with it, not wait for the length of time it would take to go from asset services to council to approve the budgets. And so, I've had a look at what I'm actually delegated and able to do in an emergency. It's actually incredibly low. So, I think there's the, yes, we need to do that work, and also just make sure we've got the delegations at the right level at the same time.
Thanks, Harry. So just on that note, for example, if there was some planned salary increases, if you look at the delegations and they fall within unbudgeted work and it's in excess of 20,000, you alluded to this the other day, Paul, that some work has been done in that space. So is that something under the delegations that should come before council, even though it is an operational matter? But if it's unbudgeted, what's your take on that, Katrina, in terms of delegations?
Our systems are not at the moment set up to proactively identify whether something triggers the financial delegations policy. So if it's above someone's delegation, we have manual purchase orders at the moment, and so it relies, so effectively when finance gets the cost that comes through at the other end, the money's already been spent. So you know, we can't be sort of the sort of the backstop. We can in some regards, in terms of operating expenditure, a electronic purchase order system may help with that. So that means that when a purchase order is raised, it checks to see whether the person approving the purchase order has the delegation and that the correct delegation to be able to approve it. That could help. The auditors also do random checks on that to make sure that they are looking more specifically, for example, if at financial delegations for, say, for example, a manager has a financial delegation up to approving up to $50,000 and they approve an invoice above that, then the electronic purchase order will pick up that, and that is also what audit looks at. I think what you potentially, Brenda, are alluding to is things that may actually, that are unbudgeted, not necessarily fit within the financial delegation. So they sit within the financial delegations, but they're not at a sort of manager approving an invoice level. It's more at a approval of unbudgeted cost level. Is that what you're saying? And if that's the case, then it's we would need to we would need to go back and have a look at it relies, to be fair, on the manager highlighting that to finance. So we would need to go back through and have a look and do a review of that.
But we also did have a process which would make sure we reinstitute, which is reporting too far. Remember, we were regularly reporting a table of unbudgeted expenditure and where the budgets were coming from. We'll put that back in place. I think that would go to helping you guys to get more visibility over those things.
Thank you, Harry. I think it's
no, we can do that. It will take finance a bit of time to do. It's not something that because often it's, if we are aware of it, it's easy for us to highlight to FAR. But if we need to go through at a transaction level and look at unbudgeted costs, then that will actually take quite a bit more time.
And we're, you know, at that level, it was at the reasonably significant. It was the 40, 50, 60, 70,000 sort of dollar level, not at the 5, 4. You know, it's got to have some materiality. Otherwise, we're just reporting every over and under in every cost centre, because we've still got to manage our cost centres. You know, be able to manage them, and there's always an element in over and under in any cost centre.
Yeah, clearly. I mean, if you look at the delegations, the only point that had come unbudgeted items is 20,000 up to 100,000. So we're not talking about the smaller numbers.
No, exactly.
As you say, the unders and overs. Is there any merit to looking at an electronic purchase order? It might be. Can you just give the team a quick 2-second once over on the difference between electronic purchase orders, because it seems like it's another layer that provides some protection from my perspective.
Yeah, I see Charlie's taken herself off mute, because I will hand over to her. We did have it in the budget for this financial year, I believe. Charlie might be next actually, but we've pushed it down the track because we just don't have the capacity at the moment to put that in place. But Charlie, can you speak about this, please?
Absolutely. So yeah, it was in for this financial year, but will be next at the earliest. Essentially, you are putting the work in up front. So when a purchase order is entered into the electronic system, not only does the system check whether that person has the budget authority, the financial delegation to put in that purchase order, it also checks that there is budget for it. And if there's budget, but it doesn't, the person putting in the request doesn't have the delegation, it automatically steps up to the next person who does have that delegation available to them. So it takes a little bit of getting used to for the budget holders, but I've seen it work in other organisations that I've worked at, and it does certainly put the it front foots any issues in terms of overruns.
Yeah, it does put the onus on the organisation to adopt it, and what I mean by that is that you can always get around a system. So if you don't, because our suppliers don't generally require a purchase order in order to go off and do some work for us. So it relies on the managers actually front-footing purchase orders and making sure that they are raised for each appropriate instance.
Okay, thanks very much.
Just to complete that, Lee, this is manual purchase orders. I don't know any place in the world that is still doing that system. It's honestly carbon paper. It's in triplicate. And it means the person physically has to take a manual purchase order to a supplier with a number. This is such old technology in terms of modern business practice. It's not even funny.
Yeah. Pam, you had a question.
Yes, thanks, Lee. Charlie and Katrina, can I ask, was that deferred because of the cost of putting that system in place, or because you physically don't have the manpower to actually put the system in place? So
yeah, it's a little bit of both. Mainly it's capacity. And not only capacity within the finance team, but it's also a big education piece for the organisation. But mainly it is around capacity to do the work.
Yeah. I think that's something that we need to relook at. Yeah.
There was also a small element of fact finding, Pam. I wanted to go along to Carterton to discuss how, because they inputted the electronic purchase orders last year, and I just wanted to learn from their lessons, if you see what I mean. So unfortunately with COVID that's become difficult to do, but I can try and do that online.
Okay, lovely, Charlie. I think it's a great idea to be able to talk to somebody that's implemented it and get to know the bugs before we do that. Yeah. Great, thank you.
Thanks very much, Charlie. Colin.
Yes, very quickly, just some of the discussions talked around procurement and goods and supplies and services, and that just as a risk, I guess, are we gearing ourselves up for a shortage of goods and services and contractors to carry out some of our urgent work? How are we coping with that at the moment? I know that there's a nationwide the shortfall of tradesmen and expertise across the country during COVID. I'm just, you want to get a better picture on how we're coping with that as a council.
So I know in the water space, it's a challenge. It's a challenge. They have challenges on many fronts in terms, also in their staffing, because the market is such that that there's a lot of movement in the labour space at the moment, and I think that's being felt definitely within the water team with Wellington Water, but also Paul can talk to that it's across the board. We've been looking for EHO officer for months. We've been looking for a building control for months. We're just not even getting the applicants. So there's a lot of pressure on that. In terms of contractors in other areas, again, roading, I think is pretty much under control in terms of delivery, with Fulton Hogan being the major contractor there. In terms of the amenities space, I think it's fair to say the amenities manager has a group of contractors a pool of contractors that he pulls on, and they are quite responsive to his needs for emergency work in that space. It's more around those bigger projects and getting commitment to some of those CapEx programs that I see the biggest sort of risk in terms of contractors.
sense that, if I may just interrupt that, I think the main thing is that we're going to see is over the next 2 to 3 months, as we see the borders reopen, we see greater movement of people coming back into the country or overseas immigration. I'm already looking into registering us with Immigration New Zealand to see, on the national skills shortages list, to see if there's ways in which we can attract talent from overseas. But these are all preparatory steps for bringing more people into the country. I know the likes of Fulton Hogan and some of the contractors, they're already registered with Immigration New Zealand, where they sponsor people coming into the country. So they'll do it. They're doing everything they can, but with the border shut, we're kind of dealing with the workforce that we've got at the moment.
Sorry, Colin, it's also materials. So, Katrina made the comment about Fulton's and our contractors and things, but actually their ability to get the materials to actually do the fixes on the road network, for instance, guardrail, it's taken us 9 months to get a piece of guardrail, simply because it's got to come from overseas. So, so sometimes we've got the capacity, we've got the labour, we just haven't got the materials to actually do the job.
Yeah, and I know Wellington Water tried to stockpile a lot of pipes and things when they saw this coming 2 years ago, but that's probably running quite short by now, I would imagine.
Yes, so that sort of brings to the point of rising costs and how we're going to manage those in the future. You talk about materials and that, and I think the example was given the other day. A sheet of jibboom was about $37 and jumped up to $74. I mean, these are things that obviously are going to have an impact on us as ratepayers, and our ratepayers at the end of the day. In terms of containing costs. So I guess it's registered on your guys' radar, and we would expect to see, obviously, if it was going to impose a huge risk, then you'd be coming back to us and letting us know in no uncertain terms.
Yeah, so the challenge there is you either collect more from ratepayers or you don't deliver as much. Yep. And so that also is a balance that, we need to discuss further as well, is what we do in that space. Yeah.
Thanks very much for those answers. Appreciate that.
Okay. Right. I think what we'll do, if everybody's happy with that discussion, I think we'll move on to B3, which is the COVID Protection Framework Mitigation Report. Can I have a mover to receive the report, please? Thank you, Pam, and a seconder. Thank you, Alex. Now, I'm assuming you've all read the report in detail. Great work you've done, Paul, with all this, and the ELT team. Just a quick first question for Paul. How are all the staff doing? Because I know there's been challenges in the libraries, and I'm not sure about the swimming pools, but I understand it's quite a stressful situation many people are in right now. So staff generally doing quite well, are they?
Yeah, it's really quite warming, if I can use such a phrase. I'll take you through some of the measures in a little while as I run you through the highlights of the report. But generally speaking, Councillor, they're working well. It's a real sense of family and belonging and coming together, which is it makes it a lot easier to take people on a journey and to get people to understand why some of the tough decisions that we need to make are necessary. We've had some great feedback from operational managers and from staff as well. So it's been really reassuring, and the belief as well, the feedback in the leadership that ELT is showing, and the visibility that the ELT has is certainly providing some assurances to staff that we've got their best interests at heart.
Great. Look, it's quite a detailed report. One comment or request, I guess, is if there are significant changes, I would just like to ensure that all councillors are notified immediately if there's any significant shifts. I'm just conscious of time. It's now 5 to 12. So would you like to just give a brief comment on highlights, and then we'll have any questions after that? How does that? Just
Yeah, perfect.
Keep it brief.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Because I'm just conscious of time.
And my colleagues will know that I can talk forever, so I will keep it brief. So we know that we've recently moved to the red setting. The partial illusion around the red setting is that it actually is going to have a social impact. In fact, the majority of the red setting is around operational delivery. So that is where some of the things I kind of want to highlight to you. You may have noted from my previous remarks in previous meetings that, you know, we're already expecting to see quite a movement in the workforce just by the nature of how the New Zealand economy is going at the moment with low unemployment rates. But this is going to be further impacted now with an expected 25% of our workforce could be poorly at any one time. Now, the extent of that sickness is yet to be realised. The saving grace, of course, is that we've got in excess of 97% of the population in the district who are vaccinated. So we're hoping, of course, that the impact is going to be lessened. We do have staff members who live outside of the district. And so what I've done in the report, as you will see, is I've broken it down into controls in terms of permanent controls and preventative controls. So ELT, sorry, I'll just backtrack for a second. You'll have seen already within Martinborough anyway, that we've had a couple of reports of localised infection here in Martinborough. It was to be expected, of course, to arrive on our doorstep at some point. The things that I really want to highlight from the point of view of risk is that the government is using the term critical role. I don't know if everybody have heard that term being used. I want to give a little bit of context just so people actually understand our interpretation of it from an ELT and a perspective. So they use that word critical role because they're focusing purely on service delivery. Critical role in the terms of council services is around roading and is around public transport and is around wastewater. There aren't many definitions of critical role. However, when it comes to our localized interpretation of what those roles are, we've got to think beyond that because we've got so many interdependencies between roles. So we've adopted the word essential role. Now, so if I talk to you in the future far, please be aware that when I'm talking about essential, I'm talking about critical on steroids. Yeah, it's really about what is fit for purpose for us at South Wairarapa District Council. So anybody that doesn't fall within that essential category is still a core service, but it's the core service that we may, if we see heightened levels of infection within our workforce, that we may need to look at to make sure that we can continue in the essential services space through redeployment, through other means, right, on a short-term basis. We've done role-based risk assessments, so we know that we have got 100% of our customer-facing workforce who are fully vaccinated. And obviously I can't go into the detail, but that is something that we take a lot of assurance from. The other thing that we need to factor in, and Councillor Rhodes will have picked up on it a few minutes ago, when we talk about skills and we talk about, and Harry talked about a product as well, we've got to think about our contract management and our contractors. We need to know that those people who fall into the category of critical in terms of the government's interpretation of critical, they are many of our people who clean toilets, roading contractors, etc. So they themselves, we're needing to make sure that them, in terms of our contractual obligations, are doing what they need to do. Then we look internally and we look about the operationalization of the red setting and the phases of the red setting internally. So we have an ELT roster. That's really important from a business continuity perspective. The last thing your good selves would want is for your entire ELT to be down and not be able to lead the organisation. We have our COVID policy, as you can appreciate. We do need to look at how we make decisions around changes to controls in South Wairarapa District Council locations. Of course, you've had both the commitment from Harry and the rest of the ELT that will be a conversation with your good selves as councillors before any such changes are made. We've adopted greater use of remote working. The one flag area, Councillor Hay, to touch on your point around staff wellbeing, we're now working on a real skeleton staff at the physical council building itself. So we have about half a dozen people in the office at any one time. So mainly because we want to maintain the reception service, the customer-facing service, but at the same time, I need to make sure when I'm looking after my team who are on reception and then customer services that they're safe, physically safe. I mean, should we have anybody that come into reception who may be problematic? When we start, finally, my last final points here, when we start thinking about the impact of phase 2, which we are now in, of course, as of midnight last night, of the red setting, what it basically means is a reduction in the isolation period. Now, for anyone who is in isolation or close contacts. So we have already registered with the Ministry of Health around for essential worker exemption. That basically means that anyone who's asymptomatic and who provides a negative rapid antigen test can return to work, to ensure, which further bolsters our business continuity response. Right. The final couple of points is on our rat testing, we have a small stockpile which we're very closely managing, and with lines of supply chain demands, as we already know, we have got 500 on back order, and we'll be using it. We expect those to be delivered by the end of the month or the first week of March. It was inhibited a little bit because the government took control over the supply of rat tests, but we're still confident that we'll have those on hand. Final point is around laptops and the network.
Is that the final point or the final point of the final?
Oh, I apologise. I did warn you, Councillor Hay. I can talk forever.
I know. This is your last final point.
My last final point, I much apologise, is around our infrastructure. So making sure that people have got the right equipment. There's very little point in being able to work from home if you can't work from home because you haven't got the right equipment. So as Katrina talked about earlier, investment in our network, making sure we've got laptops assigned to people, and making sure people feel comfortable about remote working. And I can assure you, Councillor Hay, that is my final point. Thank you.
Excellent.
I invite any questions.
Thank you for your comprehensive commentary, your brief comprehensive commentary. Okay, so questions, anyone? No further questions? That shows you've done an extremely good report, Paul. Excellent. Thanks so much, Paul.
No problem.
Right, we're now going to move on to the action items. So can I have a mover to receive the report, please? Pam, and seconded by Brenda. All raise your hands in favour. Thank you very much. The motion's carried. So are there any questions for officers on the action report? No questions? I have one, which is, I'm really scared to even ask. Paul, brief answer. Last time, actually, sorry, I'm going to cancel this question because I'm going to wait till we go into publicly excluded. Sorry. Any other further questions? No. Okay, then. So now we'll just move on to the official information request topic trends. So that's item B5. So can I have a mover to receive the report? Thank you, Brenda, and seconded. Thank you, Colin. All those in favour, raise your hands. Thank you, the motion is carried. So any questions regarding this report?
So if I could just add, Lee, I mean, this came, Madam Chair, this came from as a part response to a member of public participation who implied that there are a number of official information requests and implying that time extension was an indicator of failed performance. And the implication was that there are a number of requests that people make, we should be able to make them because they're quite quick answers, and why wait for 20 days kind of thing. So it's about the timing of these things. So that's why we gave you this information. I mean, the point is, it's not the one complaint or a request, it's the context of how many you've got at any one time. And that's what governs your response. So it's not the one request on the face of it may look something that we can turn around quite quickly, and we do if we can. On the other hand, one request can have multiple requests for information and scope, ask for every single chapter or verse of history for the last 10 years. And so you go back and negotiate with the requestor to narrow down the scope to get to the heart of what they want. But the point here is, as you can see, the volume that we have, and in terms of dates, with the volume that occur within a very short space of time with questions, means that there are times that we have to space out our responses and go to the full time limits available. That was the question. So I hope that gives you satisfaction that we are managing this responsibly on balance in terms of our responses to Lagoima. That was the key. Yeah.
Thanks, Harry. And I think everybody remembers when Karen gave a presentation on the Official Information Act and how their requests, and how their council are responding. So I'm personally very comfortable. It's good to see this report. I'd like to see it continue if it's not too onerous. But Brenda, you had a question.
I have a look at when I'm looking at the Lagoima requests and the amount that are coming in. To me, it signals the lack of communication. So it meant that our staff are tied by looking up the answers for the queries, whereas if we were a bit more, if the person making the request was able to actually find the information themselves, that would reduce the time that's spent on these. Would that be a fair comment to say, Harry?
Generally, these are very bespoke kind of questions. They can be questions that are very personal. They can be about their property and land around it, or those types of things. So there is no public source of information for a number of these types of requests. I sign off nearly all of these, in fact, all of them. And so I do have a good visibility about whether this is something we should have had on our website that would give general information. And most of them, I'd say 90% of them, are just individual questions that people have that may be triggered by something, some more general information, and people want more specific information as it relates to them. So, to answer your question, no, I really think, there's always things you can do better, but generally they are quite bespoke and individual.
Cool, thank you, Harry.
Okay, so the suggestion is made that we have these trends report every quarter. I think that's a good idea. So can I have a mover to recommend that these reports are produced quarterly? Thank you, Brenda. Do I have a seconder for that? Thank you, Garrick. So all of those in favour, please raise your hand. Great, that motion is carried, and we will see these reports quarterly. Right. So I would like now to move to our agenda item C. So Can I have a mover to move into public excluded business to confirm the public excluded minutes from the 1st of December 21 for the reasons as outlined in the agenda? Thank you, Pam. And can I have a seconder? Thank you, Alex. All in favour, please raise your hand. The motion is carried. So thank you, everybody. So Steph, we now need to turn off